Hello everyone, my name's Sam. I'm based at the Minster down at the other end of town, and it's a delight to be speaking to you this morning. Now I hear the kids have got some questions for me, so Joel, over to you.
Would you rather only eat broccoli for a month, or would you rather only eat pizza for a month?
I mean, come on Joel, ask a hard question. This is an easy one. This is not fit for human consumption, is it? I mean, this is for guinea pigs, not for humans. This is for humans. Guinea pigs can't eat this. So to be fair to guinea pigs, let them eat this because they can't eat this. We therefore, for the sake of guinea pigs, need to eat the pizza, Joel.
We've heard that you have lots of pets. What is the most unusual one?
Isabella, we do have lots of pets. Well, I should say my children have lots of pets because it's nothing to do with me, obviously. It's all about the kids, right? Well, some of the children's pets have been on various Facebook videos I've been doing, but these ones haven't, so let me show you. These are assassin bugs. They come from tropical Africa. I'm picking them up carefully because they bite. There are 7,000 different kinds of assassin bugs. These ones are orange spotted ones. Aren't they just amazing? And they live off crickets. There's a kamikaze cricket just there, actually. It's going to get eaten soon. Hopefully not live on camera because we'd have to up the ratings. But yeah, they're assassin bugs. They're just brilliant, and but they do bite. And they also spray venom as well in your eyes. They're amazing shots. It's not happened to me, but they're renowned for their accuracy of shooting venom into people's eyes. So just brilliant. You don't need a PS4 or anything like that. Just get bugs. It's brilliant. And elsewhere in the house, we've got cockroaches and stick insects and geckos and gerbils and guinea pigs. And yeah, it's like a zoo here. If it rains later today, I might start building an ark because there's enough to save, that's for sure.
If you could sit down and have a coffee with anyone from the Bible, except from Jesus, who would you be with?
Well, Tilly, if I can have coffee with anyone, it would have to be Thomas, one of Jesus's disciples. I just love the way he asks the questions that no one else wants to ask. You know, when you're at school and you're thinking stuff and you know that everyone else is thinking the same thing, but no one's asking the teacher, what does it mean? Well, Thomas was always that person who stuck up his hand and said, Jesus, sorry, no, we don't get it. You're going to have to explain. And that's why I love Thomas so much. He's straight talking and he wrestles with the truth and what all of the stuff that Jesus is saying might mean for him and for us. So Thomas, is it a latte or a black Americano? So thanks for those questions, guys. Now we're going to continue looking through the book of Daniel. Today we're looking at Daniel chapter 5. Now I have to say, I think I've only ever preached twice before at St. George's, and one of those times was actually on the book of Daniel, not chapter 5 though, so I'm not going to refer you to what I said a couple of years ago, but I am looking forward to exploring Daniel chapter 5 with you. Just a reminder that in 597, Daniel and some of the other folks were taken out of Jerusalem into exile, into Babylon. And 10 years later, the Babylonians returned and they destroyed the temple. And they took all of the treasures from the temple into Babylon. And we're going to hear about those treasures, or some of them, in a moment. But I don't know about you, but the book of Daniel often reminds me of the story of Joseph. These dreams and visions, and of how Daniel interprets them. But we're not in Egypt like Joseph was. No, we're in Babylon. So over to you, Maggie. Let's hear what's going on in Babylon today.
This reading is taken from Daniel chapter 5, verses 1 to 9. King Belshazzar gave a great festival for 1,000 of his lords, and he was drinking wine in the presence of the 1,000. Under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar commanded that they bring in the vessels of gold and silver that his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem, so that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So they brought in the vessels of gold and silver that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God in Jerusalem, and the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank the wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and began writing on the plaster of the wall of the royal palace next to the lampstand. The king was watching as the hand the hand as it wrote. Then the king's face turned pale, and his thoughts terrified him. His limbs gave way, and his knees knocked together. The king cried aloud to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the diviners. And the king said to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever can read this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed in purple, have a chain of gold around his neck, and rank third in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or tell the king the interpretation. So then King Belshazzar became greatly terrified, and his face turned pale, and his lords were perplexed.
Great, well thanks Maggie. And if you've ever heard the phrase, the writing's on the wall, well now you know where it comes from. It comes from this reading in Daniel 5. So what's happening is tools that have been used for worshipping God in Jerusalem have been taken by the Babylonians into their capital city and are now being used at some hedonistic feast. Things that were sacred have been used in a blasphemous way, and clearly God is not happy. And so God shows up in that room and writes on the wall. And poor King Belshazzar is absolutely terrified. There are echoes of chapter 2 here, aren't there? Do you remember that statue made of all kinds of different metals with the feet of clay and everything else? Well, I wonder if that's why we're given this long description of who Belshazzar and all of his cronies are worshipping. The gods of gold and silver and bronze and wood and stone and everything else. I wonder if we're not being reminded of that statue in chapter 2. And what Belshazzar and everyone else are being shown is where true authority, where true power lies. Not in these mute gods of wood and stone and everything else, but rather in the God who speaks. And in this case, the God who writes. Do you remember right at the beginning of the story of God's dealings with the world? How does God interact? How does God create? He does it through speaking, doesn't he? It's one of the things that marks this God out of all of the other gods of the world, that this God speaks. That's how his creative action is revealed. That's how God continues to reveal himself to his people. He speaks and he writes, not just on walls, but also on tablets of stone, remember? Those 10 commandments given to Moses not once but twice after he smashed the first lot and had to go back up the hill and carry down replacement tablets. Because as we all know, drop a tablet and it smashes. Well, what God's doing here is exactly the same as what was being written on those tablets of stone. It's not 10 commandments, but it is about the right ordering of things. The right ordering of relationships with ourselves, with each other, but most of all, with God. That he is ultimate power, that he is the one who has ultimate authority, that he alone is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So don't muck around with this God, and don't muck around with the things of this God. Now that lampstand, those golden cups and everything else weren't significant in and of themselves, but they had significance because of what they'd been used for, because of what they signified. They weren't gods, they weren't holy in and of themselves, but they pointed to things that were holy. They pointed to the one who is, in his very essence, holiness. The one who, in his very essence, is ultimate power and authority. It's a bit like this wedding ring. In and of itself, it's a bit of gold that's worth, I don't know how much it's worth actually, much to my wife's relief. I've never had it valued and I have no intention of selling it. But it's not worth a huge amount in material terms, but it's worth a massive amount to me. And somehow, if I was to lose it or to sell it or to give it away, something about my relationship with my wife Claire would somehow be impacted, wouldn't it? I mean, it wouldn't be in very many ways, but in another way it would feel like it has. And that's what's going on here, as these gold and silver vessels and candlesticks are being mucked around with. Somehow what they point to is being mucked around with as well. And that's why God intervenes. Now, there's a brilliant bit of wordplay in this because it describes how Balthazar is so afraid that his limbs kind of dissolve. It's like his knees are knocking together. Well, that wordplay is used about Daniel later as well. Not that Daniel's limbs gave way, but no, we translate it in the NRSV certainly as how he solved the problem. But there's a sense really of how he cracked open the riddle, of how he broke it open. And it's the same word that's used there as it is for how Balthazar's limbs gave way. What's going on here is that true reality is being exposed. You can see it in the desperate pleading of Balthazar to Daniel. I'll do anything for you, up to half the kingdom. I'll give you it all, wealth and rank and whatever you ask for. Just tell me what this means. That's not rational, is it? It's complete desperation. Oh, Balthazar, great king. Well, where is your power and your authority? Where is the security that those things are supposed to give? No, you're hollow, aren't you? You're a shadow of what true kingship is supposed to be. Not Daniel, though, and not the God to whom he points. No, Daniel says, mate, you can keep your wealth. You can keep your positions of power. I just deal in truth. And here comes the truth. And he goes on to explain to Balthazar what the writing on the wall means. With echoes of A Knight's Tale, I don't know if you've seen that film, but I think it was 2001. You have been weighed, you have been measured, and you have been found wanting. And everything that you hold on to, everything that you think defines you, even though it's hollow and shallow as you just revealed, all of it is going to be taken away from you. And that's what happens. Read the rest of Daniel 5, and Balthazar dies that night. And it's not just that his son or another heir pops up and replaces him. No, the whole kingdom disappears. And the empire of Babylon is dissolved. And in its place, the kingdom is divided between the Medes and the Persians. Everything is swept away. It's all gone in a matter of hours. But Daniel remains. And the God who is King of Kings and Lord of Lords remains. That's where we find true power. That's where we find real truth. And that's where we find security. And Daniel knows that, and he stands firm in that truth. He stands firm in looking to that power and authority to define him and to be the source of his security, even in a foreign and strange land where everything around him is secure. He stands there, fully present, fully secure, resisting lures and temptations, and dealing in truth, interpreting the word of God as it's revealed, not diluting it, not watering it down, but speaking it with courage and with boldness, because he knows that anything else that claims power and authority is a pale imitation. What we have here then is ultimate authority being revealed in the most imaginative ways. God could have just woken Daniel up one morning and said, I want you to go and say this to Belshazzar. But no, there's something imaginative and creative going on here. Read the prophets and you see it happen again and again, that Jeremiah and Ezekiel do all kinds of creative things in order to strike people with the truth. Not direct into their ears or into their minds, but into their hearts. So it comes up through their bowels, through their hearts, into their minds, and helps them to wrestle with the reality that's confronting them in imaginative and creative ways. So what we've been thinking about is how God reveals reality in imaginative and creative ways. Rather than just whacking us direct with words, sometimes he does that, but often he uses creative and imaginative means in order to communicate truth. He did it in the scriptures, so why do we think he doesn't do it today? What I want us to think a little bit about is how we might be open to using our imagination in terms of how we wrestle with truth, how we think about God, and how we think about ultimate reality. So how might God speak to us through objects? And why are we nervous about that? After all, matter matters, doesn't it? I mean, God created physical matter and is faithful to all that he has made. So why are we so nervous about God speaking to us through physical things? Well, of course, what we're nervous of is idolatry, of seeing the things themselves as the thing that really matters. But I wonder if we've become so cautious about slipping into idolatry that we kind of distance ourselves too far away from physical objects and almost risk blasphemy. If idolatry is taking the things of the world and lifting them up too far, well, blasphemy is the opposite. It's taking the things of God and pulling them down to the earth as if they don't matter and disregarding them. And I wonder if we don't risk blaspheming created things. I wonder whether we risk ignoring their worth and their value. Things can speak to us. They're not truth in and of themselves, but just like the wedding ring, they can point to reality, and they can shine a light or act as a lens to help us understand reality in ways that really connect not just with what's in here, but what's in here as well. And that's why I really enjoy trying to find things that illustrate points that I'm trying to make. Preachers are very good at that. You know, sometimes understanding what the passage means is a tricky bit of work, but even when it's difficult, the really hard bit about any kind of sermon or talk is finding the things, the stories or the objects that illustrate the point that you're trying to make. And often preachers will spend just as long on finding the illustrations and the application as they will on researching what the passage itself means. Because it's the illustration that really helps to unlock the meaning and then to move into applying it to people's lives. But I wonder if we can do it the other way around. Rather than starting with a passage and thinking about what illustrates this or helps us to understand it, why not experiment with contemplating objects and seeing what truth they speak of, what they remind us of? Do you see how we're doing it the other way around? We're not starting with the truth of Scripture and thinking what illustrates it. We're starting with an object and thinking, what does this illustrate? And seeking to connect it with the Scriptures. Now, you're going to have to bear with me because I've not rehearsed this, but we're in my dining room. It looks neat and ordered behind me. It's chaos in front. There's 6 people in this house at the moment and all of these animals. But if I was just to pick up like this flannel off the table, I've not thought about it, but a flannel would remind me about how God wipes away my sin, not just the surface stuff, but even the deeper stuff. So it's kind of like a flannel I need to swallow to deal with all the internal stuff then. Or because it's a Christian household, we have a night light. And I might want to reflect about how even in the darkest places, God shines a light. Or this hasn't been lit for weeks because we've not had people around for dinner. And I might think about how God's presence is active with all of those people who would normally sit around this table at various times. And somehow how God unites us and sustains our relationships even when we're apart. There's a board here. I'm never quite sure what this is for, but I think it's to look good on the table and to impress people. But I might want to reflect on how God is like security and is like in between me and the things of the world sometimes to prevent me from being damaged by stuff that's hot or abrasive underneath. You know, God's Spirit comes between me and the things of the world sometimes. There's salt and pepper here. These things put stuff everywhere. They're forever dropping bits. But, you know, God's Spirit adds season to life. And, of course, God calls me to be salt in the world. So every time I shake this stuff, I might want to think about how's my discipleship going? Or, you know, there are things on the shelves here, pencil sharpener. You know, Lord, how can I sharpen myself up in my discipleship with you? Do you see, I'm not starting with Scripture and thinking, what can I find to illustrate it? I'm starting with objects and thinking, how might these remind me of things about God? Or how might they help me in my discipleship to inject a bit of life or freshness or to remind me of things that are important and stuff? Because the Spirit of God is at work within me and uses everything about who I am, the things around me, how I think and stuff. And that's how contemplation works. It's not that those things are the truth themselves. No. But they are a way of helping us to be reminded of the truth or to understand the truth. Now, there are some things where it's almost impossible. Like, I don't even know what this is. Oh, it's a maraca, is it? But I have no idea how I'd use that. I might have to think about that one. You might like want to think, what does that tell us about God? How does that remind us of who he is or of what we're called to be in relationship with him and the world and stuff? You know, but it's a really exciting and lively way of doing prayer, actually. There are all kinds of ways of praying, but, you know, if you're struggling to pray, why not just look around stuff that's in the room and think, how might God be speaking to me through this object or this object? What might God want to be saying to me? God is a God of creativity. He uses all that we are, who uses our imaginations in order to confront us with truth, to provoke us deeper into relationship with him. So be creative. Don't get muddled up. They're not the truth in and of themselves, but they can be windows, reminders, postcards of truth that help refresh us in our relationship with God, that help refresh our discipleship out there in the world, and that give us illustrations that we might then use and share with other people. You know, because of doing this, I can't go around this house without being reminded of particular things. You know, when I flick on a light, I'm reminded to pray for light to shine in the darkest places of the world. Every time I flush the loo, that the Lord would wash away my sins and take away all the rubbish stuff. You know, you just get in the habit then of being creative and imaginative and of being reminded of how God is at work around us. So have fun. Discuss it in your small groups. Discuss it around the meal table as you pass around the salt and the pepper, or in our case, the wet flannel, and see how God might be speaking to you today. God is a God who is alive, who is ultimate power and authority, and a God who speaks. So be open to how he might be speaking to you this week.